Victoria Sterling stood on the marble balcony of her hotel room, watching the Aegean Sea shimmer under the early morning sun. The white buildings of Santorini cascaded down the cliffsides like a waterfall of dreams, and for the first time in months, she felt something close to peace. This trip had cost her nearly every penny she'd saved from her artwork sales. But seeing her 7-year-old twins sleeping peacefully in the adjoining room made every sacrifice worthwhile. She sipped her coffee slowly, savoring the moment. Oliver and Noah deserved this happiness, this glimpse of a world beyond their small apartment in Brooklyn.
Oh.
They had never asked about their father, but Victoria knew the questions would come eventually. How could she explain that their father was a man who had vanished the moment success called his name, leaving her pregnant and alone without even knowing it? The resort was magnificent. Far beyond anything Victoria could normally afford, she had booked the trip during a flash sale. Using a credit card she promised herself she would pay off somehow. The twins had been ecstatic when she told them about Greece, their faces lighting up with wonder as she showed them pictures of the blue-domed churches and crystal-clear waters. An unexpected arrival across the resort, in the penthouse suite that commanded a view of the entire caldera. Damien Cross was already dressed in his signature black suit, despite the early hour. His assistant had arranged this working vacation to finalize a merger that would expand his tech empire across Europe. The irony wasn't lost on him that he was conducting business in one of the world's most romantic destinations, while feeling more isolated than ever. At 32, Damien had everything most men dreamed of. A billion-dollar company, houses on 3 continents, an influence that reached the highest levels of government and industry. Yet lately he found himself thinking about the roads not taken. The choices that had led him to this pinnacle of success, but left him emotionally hollow. His phone buzzed with messages from his board members. But for once he ignored them. Something about this place, with its ancient beauty and timeless rhythm, made the corporate world feel distant and unimportant. He stepped onto his private terrace, breathing in the salt air and letting his mind wander to memories he usually kept locked away. The twins discover Paradise. Victoria gently woke Oliver and Noah, their sleepy faces breaking into grins when they remembered where they were. The boys were identical in many ways, with their golden brown hair and bright green eyes, but their personalities couldn't be more different. Oliver was the cautious one, always thinking before he acted, while Noah dove headfirst into every adventure with infectious enthusiasm. "Mom, can we see the pool today?" Noah asked, bouncing on his bed with excitement. "The one with the infinity edge that looks like it goes right into the ocean?" Victoria smiled, her heart swelling with love for these 2 perfect beings who had given her life meaning when she needed it most. "After breakfast, my loves. But first, let's get you both ready." The resort's breakfast terrace was a vision of elegance, with pristine white tables overlooking the volcanic landscape. But Victoria had chosen a quiet corner table, hoping to avoid the curious stares that sometimes followed when people noticed she was traveling alone with children. The twins chattered excitedly about their plans for the day, their voices carrying the pure joy that only children possessed. At collision of destinies, Damien had decided to take his breakfast on the main terrace instead of his private dining room, drawn by an inexplicable urge to be among people rather than isolated in luxury. He moved through the restaurant with the confidence that came from years of commanding boardrooms and closing impossible deals. He was reviewing documents on his tablet when a burst of childish laughter made him look up. 2 boys were giggling at something their mother had whispered, their faces animated with delight. Something about their profiles, the way they tilted their heads when they laughed, sent a chill through him that had nothing to do with the morning breeze. Victoria was helping Noah cut his pancakes when she felt eyes on her. She glanced up casually, expecting to see another guest admiring the view, but instead found herself staring into a face that haunted her dreams and nightmares in equal measure. The coffee cup slipped from her fingers, shattering against the marble floor with a sound that seemed to echo across the entire terrace. Damien felt the blood drain from his face as recognition hit him like a physical blow. Victoria, after 8 years, there she was, as beautiful as ever, but with something different in her eyes, strength and wariness that hadn't been there before. And beside her, 2 children who bore an unmistakable resemblance to his own childhood photographs. The weight of recognition, The silence stretched between them across the terrace, heavy with unspoken words and buried emotions. Other guests turned to look at the broken cup, but Victoria barely noticed. Her entire world had narrowed to the man standing frozen 20 feet away. The man who had promised to call and never did, who had left for a business opportunity that was supposed to last 2 weeks and never returned. Oliver and Noah looked between their mother and the stranger with growing confusion. They had never seen their mother look so pale, so shaken. Oliver, ever protective, reached for Victoria's hand while Noah stared openly at the tall man in the expensive suit. "Mommy, are you okay?" Oliver whispered, his small voice cutting through. Victoria's shock. She forced herself to breathe, to remember that her children were watching. Whatever this encounter meant, whatever pain it might reopen, her boys came first. They always came first. "I'm fine, sweetheart," she managed, her voice steadier than she felt. "Just a little clumsy with my coffee." But Damien was moving now, crossing the terrace with determined strides. Other guests parted before him unconsciously, sensing the intensity radiating from his tall frame. Victoria wanted to run, to grab her children and disappear, but her legs felt rooted to the spot. Confronting the past, Victoria. Name fell from his lips like a prayer and a curse combined. Up close, she could see the changes 8 years had wrought in his face. The boyish softness was gone, replaced by sharp angles and lines that spoke of sleepless nights and ruthless decisions. But his eyes, those dark eyes that had once made her believe in forever, remained unchanged. Damien. She stood slowly, instinctively, positioning herself between him and the twins. "What are you doing here?" "Business retreat," he said, though the words felt meaningless in the face of this impossible coincidence. His gaze moved to the children, and Victoria saw the exact moment when the resemblance hit him fully. The color that had returned to his face drained away again. Noah, never one to be ignored, piped up with characteristic boldness. "Are you a friend of our mom's? You look important, like the people on TV?" The innocent question hung in the air like a challenge. Victoria's heart hammered against her ribs as she waited for Damien's response. How do you explain to a 7-year-old that the stranger might be his father? How do you protect them from the complexity of adult failures and broken promises? The questions begin. Damien knelt slowly to Noah's eye level, his movement careful and deliberate. "I'm an old friend of your mother's," he said, his voice gentler than Victoria remembered it could be. "What's your name?" "I'm Noah, and this is my brother Oliver. We're twins, but we're not identical because I'm braver and he's smarter." Noah's easy confidence made Victoria's chest tighten with pride and terror in equal measure. Oliver stepped closer to his mother, his cautious nature keeping him watchful. "How old of a friend?" he asked, his question sharper than his years should have allowed. Victoria saw Damien swallow hard at the question. She could practically see him doing the math, counting backwards from the boy's apparent age to that summer, 8 years ago, when their world had exploded with passion and possibility, before reality tore them apart. "We knew each other before you were born," Damien answered carefully, his eyes never leaving the children's faces. Victoria could see him cataloging every feature, every gesture, looking for confirmation of what his heart already knew. "A mother's protection, boys. Why don't you finish your breakfast?" Victoria said, her voice carrying a note of finality that both children recognized. They had learned to read their mother's moods, to understand when adult conversations were approaching that required their absence. Oliver nodded and guided his brother back to their seats, but Victoria could feel their curious gazes burning between her and Damien. She had always been honest with them, but how could she be honest about this? How could she explain that their father had chosen his career over a future he didn't even know existed? Damien straightened slowly, his impressive height suddenly feeling oppressive in the morning sunlight. "We need to talk," he said quietly, his words meant for her alone. "No," Victoria replied immediately, her protective instincts flaring. "We don't need anything. My sons and I are here for a vacation, nothing more." But even as she spoke the words, she could see the determination building in Damien's expression. This was the face that had conquered boardrooms and built an empire from nothing. This was the man who never backed down from a challenge, who saw obstacles as puzzles to be solved rather than barriers to accept. "Victoria, please," he said, and she heard echoes of the young man she had once loved in his voice. "Just give me 5 minutes. Just let me explain." Around them, the breakfast terrace continued its elegant dance of morning service. Waiters glided between tables with silver coffee pots and crystal juice glasses, while guests murmured appreciatively about the view and planned their days of leisure. But for Victoria, the world had narrowed to this moment, this choice that would determine whether the peaceful life she had built for her children would survive intact. She looked at Oliver and Noah, saw them trying to pretend they weren't listening. While hanging on every word, they deserved better than a scene, better than having their vacation destroyed by adult drama they couldn't understand. "Not here," she said finally, her decision made. "Not in front of them." Damien nodded, relief flickering across his features. "Tonight, after they're asleep, the beach below the resort by the old lighthouse." "Please, Victoria, I need to know." She wanted to refuse, wanted to pack her bags and flee to some other corner of the world where the past couldn't find them. She had learned over the years that running only delayed the inevitable. Some conversations had to be had, some truths had to be faced, no matter how much they might hurt. 11 o'clock, she said quietly. "But this doesn't change anything, Damien. My sons don't need a father who appears and disappears like morning mist." As she spoke the words, she saw him flinch, as if she had struck him. Good, she thought with satisfaction tinged by old pain. Aye! Let him feel a fraction of what she had endured when he vanished without explanation. Leaving her to build a life from the ashes of their dreams, the morning sun climbed higher over Santorini, painting the white buildings in shades of gold and rose. But for Victoria Sterling and Damien Cross, the beautiful day felt like the calm before a storm that would either destroy what remained of their past or force them to finally confront the future they had never dared to imagine. Victoria spent the morning in a daze, going through the motions of vacation while her mind spun with memories and fears. She took Oliver and Noah to the famous infinity pool, watched them splash and laugh in the azure water, but part of her remained frozen. In that moment on the breakfast terrace, when her carefully constructed world had tilted off its axis, the twins seemed to sense her distraction. Oliver kept glancing at her with worried eyes, while Noah peppered her with questions about the important man they had met. Victoria deflected as best she could, but she knew her children were too perceptive to be fooled for long. "Mom, why? Did that man make you drop your coffee?" Oliver asked, as they lounged on cushioned chairs beside the pool. His question was quiet, thoughtful in the way that always made Victoria's heart ache with pride and protectiveness. "Sometimes grown-ups get surprised when they see old friends," she said carefully, smoothing sunscreen across his shoulders. "Nothing for you to worry about, sweetheart." But Noah, never content with simple answers, sat up straighter. "He looked like he wanted to talk to us more. Are we going to see him again?" The innocent question hit Victoria like a physical blow. How could she explain that, yes, they might see him again, and that he might want to be part of their lives in ways that could change everything? How could she tell them that the stranger with the kind eyes might be their father, the missing piece of their family puzzle she had never known how to explain? Damien's struggle 3 floors above. Damien stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his suite, his phone buzzing incessantly with calls from his assistant, Jessica Chen. The merger talks that had brought him to Santorini seemed utterly meaningless. Now, corporate maneuvers that paled in comparison to the earth-shattering possibility that he was a father. He had spent the day researching everything he could find about Victoria's life since he had left. Her social media presence was minimal, but he found traces of her artwork, small gallery showings in Brooklyn, a few online sales. She had built a quiet life as a single mother and struggling artist. Far removed from the glittering world of wealth and power he inhabited, the more he learned, the more his guilt deepened. While he had been conquering markets and accumulating wealth, she had been raising 2 children alone. The children who looked exactly like him at that age, their golden brown hair and bright green eyes that seemed to see everything. Jessica had knocked on his door twice, each time more frantic, about the calls from board members and investors. But Damien couldn't bring himself to care about quarterly projections and market analyses. For the first time in his adult life, business felt like a pale substitute for something real and vital. An afternoon of revelation, as the afternoon sun began to slant toward evening, Victoria made a decision that surprised even herself. She approached the resort's concierge, elegant woman named Helena, who spoke perfect English with a musical Greek accent. "I need someone to watch my children tonight," Victoria said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Just for a few hours." "Very well behaved, but I have something important to discuss with someone." Helena's eyes brightened with understanding. The resort offered babysitting services for guests. She quickly arranged for Maria, a local grandmother who specialized in caring for visiting children. Victoria felt a pang of anxiety at leaving the twins with a stranger. But she knew this conversation with Damien couldn't happen with little ears nearby. When she returned to their room, she found Oliver and Noah building an elaborate castle from the resort's plush pillows and blankets. Their laughter filled the space. And for a moment, Victoria allowed herself to imagine that nothing had changed, that they could continue their vacation in blissful ignorance of the complications that lurked just beyond their perfect bubble. But reality had a way of intruding. On even the most carefully constructed fantasies, the confrontation Loom's dinner was a struggle. Victoria picked at her food while the twins chattered about their day, their excitement about the evening's activities, and their plans for tomorrow. They had no idea that their world might be fundamentally different by morning, that the man they had met at breakfast might claim a role in their lives that would change everything. Oliver, always sensitive to his mother's moods, reached across the table to pat her hand. "Are you feeling sick, Mom? You look worried." Victoria forced a smile, covering his small hand with hers. "I'm fine, sweetheart. Just thinking about grown-up things that aren't very interesting." Noah, meanwhile, was scanning the restaurant with obvious hope. "Do you think we'll see that important man again?" "I liked him. Seems sad, though. Maybe he needs friends." The innocent observation pierced Victoria's heart. Even at 7, Noah had picked up on something in Damien's demeanor. Some loneliness that transcended his wealth and success. It was a reminder that the man she had once loved might still exist beneath the polished exterior of the billionaire CEO. After dinner, Maria arrived to watch the twins. She was exactly as Helena had promised. A warm grandmother with twinkling eyes and infinite patience. Oliver and Noah took to her immediately, especially when she produced a bag of traditional Greek sweets and began teaching them simple words in her native language. Victoria kissed them both goodnight, her heart heavy with the knowledge that this might be the last evening of their uncomplicated happiness. Whatever happened on the beach tonight, whatever truths emerged from her confrontation with Damien, nothing would ever be quite the same again. The beach meeting the old lighthouse sat on a rocky promontory below the resort, accessible by a winding path that had been carved into the cliff face centuries ago. Victoria arrived first, her sandals crunching on the pebbled beach as she walked toward the weathered stone structure. The moon was nearly full, painting the Aegean in silver and casting long shadows across the sand. She had changed into a simple, white dress, something that made her feel strong and confident despite the chaos in her heart. The evening air was warm and fragrant with the scent of wild herbs that grew along the cliffsides, but Victoria barely noticed the beauty around her. Her entire focus was on the conversation ahead, on the words that needed to be spoken after. 8 years of silence. Damien appeared exactly at 11. His tall figure materializing from the shadows like something from a dream. He had abandoned his business suit for dark jeans and a white shirt, the casual clothes making him look younger, more like the man she had once known and loved. They stood facing each other across the moonlit beach, the gentle lapping of waves the only sound between them. Victoria could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands clenched and unclenched at his sides, as if he were fighting for control. "Thank you for coming," he said finally, his voice carrying clearly across the small distance between them. Victoria wrapped her arms around herself, as much for emotional protection as against the evening breeze. "You said you needed to know." "Know what? Exactly?" The truth emerged as Damien took a step closer, his dark eyes reflecting the moonlight. "Are they mine? Victoria, Oliver, and Noah, are they my sons?" The question hung between them like a challenge thrown down on ancient ground. Victoria had imagined this moment countless times over the years, had rehearsed different responses, different ways of protecting herself and her children, but now, faced with his direct gaze and the raw need in his voice, she found that only the truth would serve. "Yes," she said simply, the word carrying 8 years of pain and struggle and fierce maternal love. "They're your sons." Damien's knees nearly buckled at the confirmation. He had known, of course, from the moment he saw them, but hearing the words spoken aloud made it real in a way that observation never could. He was a father, had been a father for 7 years without knowing it. "Why didn't you tell me?" the question came out harsh, almost accusatory, and Victoria's spine stiffened with old anger. "Tell you what exactly?" she shot back, her voice rising with emotion she had kept buried for too long. "Tell your voicemail. Tell your assistant who said you were unavailable? Tell the empty apartment you never came back to?" The words hit Damien like physical blows, each one a reminder of how completely he had failed her when it mattered most. He remembered those weeks after he left for what was supposed to be a short business trip, how the opportunity had expanded and evolved, how he had gotten caught up in the intoxicating rush of success and let days turn into weeks without calling. "I tried to reach you," he said weakly, knowing even as he spoke that it wasn't enough. "You tried twice," Victoria said, her voice bitter with old hurt. "2 phone calls in 8 years, Damien. 2 calls where you talked about how busy you were, how this deal was going to change everything, how you would call back soon, and then nothing. Radio silence while I discovered I was pregnant and gave birth and raised 2 children who ask me every Christmas why Santa doesn't bring them a daddy." The weight of regret the image of his sons asking for a father for Christmas hit Damien harder than any business loss or professional failure ever had. He thought of all the bedtime stories he had never read, all the scraped knees he had never kissed, all the proud moments he had missed while building an empire that suddenly felt hollow and meaningless. "I didn't know," he whispered, the words inadequate but all he had to offer. "Victoria, I swear to you, if I had known about them, I would have come back. I would have done anything," she laughed. But there was no humor in the sound, would you? Would you really have given up your precious merger, your big break, your chance to build the business empire you dreamed about? Because that's what it is. Would have taken Damien, not grand gestures or occasional visits, but the daily, grinding, beautiful work of being a parent. The accusation stung, because it carried the weight of truth. The young man he had been 8 years ago had been ambitious to the point of ruthlessness, willing to sacrifice anything for success. Would he have chosen differently if he had known? About the pregnancy, he wanted to believe he would have, but the uncertainty gnawed at him. "I was different then," he said finally. "I was younger, more selfish. I thought success was the only thing that mattered, that everything else could wait until I had built something substantial. And now," Victoria asked, her voice softening slightly, "what's different now?" A moment of vulnerability. Damien looked out at the moonlit sea, gathering his thoughts and his courage. "Now, I know that all the success in the world means nothing if you have no one to share it with. I've built everything I dreamed of, Victoria. I wake up every morning in empty houses surrounded by people who want something from me. I have more money than I can spend in 10 lifetimes, but I haven't had a real conversation with another human being in months." The admission hung between them, raw and honest, in a way that reminded Victoria of late-night conversations they had shared in another lifetime. She could see the loneliness in his posture, the way success had isolated him even as it elevated him. "That doesn't give you the right to walk back into our lives," she said, but her voice lacked the sharp edge it had carried moments before. "Oliver and Noah are happy, Damien. They're well-adjusted, confident children who don't need the chaos. That comes with your world." "I know," he said quietly. "And I'm not asking to disrupt their lives, or yours. I'm just asking for a chance to know them, to be part of their world in whatever way you'll allow." Victoria turned away, looking out at the endless expanse of water that stretched toward the horizon. Part of her wanted to say yes, to give him the chance he was asking for. But the protective mother in her recoiled from any risk to her children's emotional well-being. "They don't know about you," she said finally. "They've never asked detailed questions about their father because I've always made it clear that topic was closed. But they're getting older, more curious. Soon they'll want answers, I'm not sure. I'm ready to give. The promised Damien moved closer, close enough that she could smell his cologne and feel the warmth radiating from his skin. Then let me help you give them those answers. Let me be present this time, Victoria. Let me prove that. I can be the father they deserve, even if I can never make up for the years I missed. She turned to face him, studying his face in the moonlight, for any trace of the casual selfishness that had driven him away 8 years ago. What she saw instead was a man haunted by regret, shaped by loneliness, and desperately sincere in his desire to do better. It can't be about assuaging your guilt, she said firmly. If you want to be part of their lives, it has to be about them, not about making yourself feel better for past mistakes. I understand, he replied immediately. Whatever you decide, whatever boundaries you set, I'll respect them. I just want the chance to try. Victoria closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the decision settling on her shoulders. She thought of Oliver's serious questions and Noah's boundless curiosity. Of the ways they had both begun to notice that other children had fathers while they did not. Maybe it was time to stop protecting them from a truth that might ultimately enrich their lives rather than complicate them. We'll start slow, she said finally, opening her eyes to meet his gaze. Carefully, if you hurt them, if you disappear again, or put your business ahead of their needs even once, I will make sure you never see them again. Do you understand me? Relief flooded Damien's features, followed immediately by something that looked like gratitude mixed with terror. I understand, he said solemnly. Thank you, Victoria. Thank you for giving me this chance. As they stood on the moonlit beach with the ancient lighthouse watching over them, both Victoria and Damien felt the weight of the future settling around them. The past could not be changed. The hurt could not be undone, but perhaps, with careful steps and open hearts, they could build something new from the ashes of what had been lost. Victoria woke before dawn, her mind racing despite the exhaustion that weighed down her limbs. The conversation with Damien on the beach felt like something from a vivid dream, but the emotional residue was all too real. She had agreed to let him into their lives, but now, in the harsh light of morning reality, the magnitude of that decision pressed down on her like a physical weight. The twins were still sleeping, their faces peaceful and innocent in the soft light filtering through the curtains. Oliver had one arm flung protectively around his brother, a habit that had started when they were toddlers and continued even now. Victoria's heart clenched with fierce love and protective fear. How do you tell two 7-year-old boys that the stranger they met yesterday is their father? How do you prepare them for the possibility that their quiet, predictable world is about to change forever? She slipped out onto the balcony with her coffee, hoping the morning air would clear her head and help her find the right words. The resort was beginning to stir below her. Early rising guests heading to the breakfast terrace where this entire upheaval had begun less than 24 hours ago. Her phone buzzed with a text from Damien. Good morning. I know you need time to think about how to handle this. I'm available whenever you're ready to talk, but I won't pressure you or approach the boys without your permission. The message was respectful, patient, everything she had hoped for but hadn't dared to expect. It reminded her of the considerate man she had fallen in love with 8 years ago, for ambition and poor choices had torn them apart. The boy's sense changeover was the first to wake, as usual, his internal clock as reliable as sunrise. He found Victoria on the balcony and curled up beside her on the cushioned chair, his small body warm and trusting against her side. You're worried about something, he said with a directness that sometimes startled adults who expected 7-year-olds to be less perceptive. Is it about that man from yesterday? Right. Victoria's arm tightened around him. What makes you think that, sweetheart? You had the same look on your face that you get when the landlord calls about rent, Oliver said matter-of-factly. Like you're trying to solve a really hard problem that might change things. Before Victoria could respond, Noah burst onto the balcony with his characteristic enthusiasm, his hair sticking up in wild tufts, and his eyes bright with excitement for the new day. Are we going to see the important man again today? He asked immediately, bouncing on his toes. I thought about it all night, and I think he might be lonely. Maybe we could invite him to have lunch with us. The innocent suggestion made Victoria's chest tight with emotion. Noah's generous heart always sought to include others, to spread his abundant joy to anyone who seemed to need it. The irony that he wanted to befriend the father he didn't know he had was almost too much to bear. Actually, Victoria said slowly, making the decision as she spoke. I think we should talk about something important. Both of you, come sit with me. The conversation the twins settled on either side of her. Oliver's serious face already reflecting his understanding that something significant was about to be discussed. Noah squirmed slightly, but focused his attention on his mother with the intensity he usually reserved for his favorite cartoons. You know how sometimes other kids at school talk about their daddies? Victoria began carefully, her heart hammering. Against her ribs, both boys nodded. It was a topic that had come up occasionally. Usually when classmates shared stories about weekend activities or family vacations that included fathers, Oliver and Noah had always accepted Victoria's explanations. That some families were different, that they had each other, and that was enough. Well, the man we met yesterday, his name is Damien, and he's someone very special from before you were born, Victoria continued, choosing her words with exquisite care. He and I knew each other a long time ago, and then he had to go away for work, and we lost touch with each other. Noah's face scrunched up in confusion. But why didn't he come back when he was done working? The question pierced Victoria's heart with its simplicity. How do you explain adult failures and missed chances to children who see the world in clear terms of right and wrong? Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes, she said softly. Sometimes they think work is more important than people, and by the time they realize they're wrong, too much time has passed and they don't know how to fix things. Oliver, with his talent for reading between lines, leaned forward slightly. Mom, is he our dad? The direct question hung in the air like a held breath. Victoria looked into her son's intelligent green eyes, so much like Damien's, and knew that half-truths and evasions would no longer serve. These children deserved honesty, even if it complicated their world, as she said simply. Damien is your father. Processing the truth, the silence that followed Victoria's confirmation seemed to stretch for hours, though it was probably only seconds. Both boys stared at her with wide eyes, processing this monumental piece of information that recontextualized their entire understanding of their family. Noah was the first to speak, his voice small and uncertain. So we do have a daddy? He's just been working this whole time? It's more complicated than that, sweetheart, Victoria said gently. He didn't know about you. When he left for his work trip, he didn't know that you were going to be born. I tried to tell him, but we couldn't reach each other. And then years went by. Oliver's analytical mind was working through the implications. But he knows about us. Now, that's why he looked so surprised yesterday? Yes, Victoria confirmed. He was very surprised, and he wants to get to know you both, if that's something you'd like. The Bestic twins exchanged one of their wordless communications, the kind of silent conversation that only twins seemed capable of. Finally, Oliver spoke for both of them. What's he like? Besides being important and wearing fancy clothes? Victoria smiled despite the emotional turmoil churning in her chest. He's very smart, like you, Oliver. He has a big heart like Noah. He builds companies that help people, and he travels all over the world for his work. Does he want to be our dad now? Noah asked, getting straight to the heart of what mattered most. He wants to try, Victoria said carefully. But being a daddy isn't just about wanting it. It's about showing up every day, being patient when you're frustrated, reading bedtime stories even when you're tired. Those are things he'll have to learn and prove he can do. Meeting on new terms after breakfast, Victoria sent a text to Damien. The boys know. They'd like to meet you properly, but I need you to understand that this is their choice too. If they're uncomfortable or want space, you have to respect that. His response came immediately. Of course, whatever they need. You for trusting me with this? They arranged to meet at the resort's quiet garden area, away from the crowds and potential photographers who had begun to circulate rumors about the Billionaire CEO's unexpected family vacation. Victoria had noticed the subtle increase in attention, the way certain guests seemed to linger near their table at meals or follow them to activities. When Damien appeared on the garden path, Victoria saw him through her children's eyes for the first time. He was tall and commanding, yes, but he moved with careful deliberation, as if he understood that any sudden gesture might spook the precious beings he was hoping to approach. He had dressed casually again, in khakis and a polo shirt that made him look less like a corporate titan and more like someone's dad. Oliver and Noah flanked Victoria on a stone bench, their usual confidence tempered by curiosity and uncertainty. Damien stopped a respectful distance away, waiting for permission to come closer. Hi, Oliver. Hi, Noah, he said softly, his voice carrying a warmth that Victoria remembered from their early days together. "Your mom told me that you know who I am now." Noah, predictably, was the first to respond. She said, "You're our dad, but you didn't know about us because of work mix-ups." The simplified explanation made Damien's throat tight with emotion. "That's right. Oh, and I'm very sorry that it took so long for us to meet. I missed a lot of important things, like your first steps and your first words and all your birthdays." Oliver studied him with serious eyes. "Do you want to know about those things now?" "More than anything," Damien replied honestly. "I want to know everything about you both if you're willing to tell me." Building bridges, what followed was the most important conversation of Damien's life. Sitting in the dappled shade of olive trees, with the scent of jasmine drifting on the warm air, he listened as his sons told him about their lives with an openness that humbled him completely. Noah chattered about his love of soccer and his collection of toy cars, his favorite foods and his best friends at school. He described their apartment in Brooklyn with its view of the fire escape where pigeons nested, and how their mom let them build blanket forts in the living room on rainy days. Oliver was more reserved, but no less informative. He talked about his books, his chess set, his carefully organized rock collection. He mentioned how he helped their mom with grocery shopping and bill paying, shouldering responsibilities that seemed too heavy for 7-year-old shoulders. With every detail, Damien felt the weight of his absence more acutely. These children had built rich, full lives without him, guided by a mother whose strength and dedication shone through every story they told. He had missed everything that mattered, and no amount of wealth or success could purchase those lost years. "What do you do for work?" Oliver asked, his question more sophisticated than his years. "I help create technology that makes people's lives easier," Damien explained. "Like apps on phones that help doctors take better care of patients, or programs that help teachers make learning more fun." Noah's eyes lit up. "Do you make video games?" Sometimes Damien smiled. "Would you like to see some of the games my company has made?" The first time, both boys showed genuine enthusiasm, leaning forward with interest as Damien pulled out his phone to show them some of the educational games his development teams had created. Victoria watched the interaction with mixed emotions, seeing how easily her children warmed to this man who shared their DNA, while fighting the protective instinct that warned her against letting her guard down too quickly. Complications arise there. Peaceful afternoon was interrupted by the appearance of a woman with a professional camera, snapping pictures from behind a nearby hedge. Victoria's maternal instincts flared immediately, and she stood to shield the boys while Damien moved to intercept the photographer. "Those are private citizens, including minor children," he said firmly, his corporate authority evident in every line of his posture. "Delete those photos immediately." The woman, clearly a freelance paparazzi hoping to cash in on the story, argued briefly before retreating in the face of Damien's obvious wealth and influence. But the damage was done. Oliver and Noah had seen the camera, had witnessed their first taste of the attention that followed their father wherever he went. "Why was she taking pictures of us?" Oliver asked, his voice tight with worry. Victoria knelt beside him, her hands gentle on his shoulders. "Sometimes when people are famous, other people want to take their pictures to sell to magazines. But that doesn't mean we have to let them." "Am I famous now?" Noah asked, his usual excitement dimmed by uncertainty. "No, sweetheart," Victoria assured him. "You're just you, and that's perfect." But Damien could see the concern in Victoria's eyes, the way she was already calculating how to protect their children from a world that would see them as commodities rather than precious individuals, deserving privacy and peace. That evening, after the boys had gone to bed with Maria's help once again, Victoria and Damien walked along the resort's private beach. Conversation was more difficult than the night before, weighted with new complications and the reality of what integrating their lives might actually mean. "This is what I was afraid of," Victoria said, her voice tight with stress. "The cameras, the attention, the way people will want to use them to get to you or to sell stories about your personal life." "I can hire security," Damien offered. "The best personal protection available, people who specialize in keeping families safe while maintaining their privacy." Victoria stopped walking and turned to face him. "Do you hear yourself? We're talking about hiring bodyguards for 7-year-old boys." Because their father is too famous to let them have normal lives? Is that really what you want for them? The question hit Damien like a physical blow because it forced him to confront the fundamental incompatibility between his world and the simple, authentic life Victoria had built for their children. Could he really ask them to give up their freedom, their anonymity, their ability to be normal kids, just so he could satisfy his need to be their father? I don't know, he admitted, the honesty painful, but necessary. I've spent so many years building this empire, accumulating power and influence, and I never thought about the cost it might have for the people I love. But I can't just walk away from everything I've built, Victoria. Even if I wanted to, there are thousands of people who depend on my companies for their livelihoods. I'm not asking you to walk away from your business, Victoria said, her voice softer now. I'm asking you to find a way to be their father that doesn't require them to live in a fishbowl. Resolution and new beginnings, they walked in silence for several minutes, each lost in thought as they grappled with the seemingly impossible task of reconciling to vastly different worlds. Finally, Damien spoke. What if we took it slowly? What if I spent time with them here, in private, away from the cameras and the business pressures? And then, when we all feel ready, we could figure out how to make it work in the real world. Victoria considered this, weighing her protective instincts against her children's right to know their father and his obvious, sincere desire to be part of their lives. 1 week, she said finally. We'll extend our stay here for 1 week. You can spend time with Oliver and Noah, get to know them properly, and they can decide how they feel about having you in their lives. But after that, we go home to Brooklyn, to our normal life. And if you want to be part of it, you'll have to figure out how to do that without disrupting their world. Relief and gratitude flooded Damien's features. 1 week, I'll make it count. Victoria, I promise, don't promise me, she said firmly. Promise them. They're the ones who matter now. Epilogue. 6 months later, the Brooklyn apartment. Small, but filled with laughter, as Oliver and Noah showed their father their latest school projects. Damien had kept his word, finding ways to be present in their lives that didn't require bodyguards or media attention. He had moved his primary residence to New York, delegated more responsibility to his executive team, and learned the simple pleasure of homework help and bedtime stories. The DNA test had been a formality, it's confirming what everyone already knew. But more important than genetics was the slow, careful building of trust and love between a father and the sons he had never expected to have. Victoria watched from the kitchen doorway as Damien helped Noah with a math problem while Oliver read, quietly beside them. It wasn't the family she had imagined 8 years ago. But it was real and imperfect and beautiful in ways she couldn't have anticipated. There were still challenges. Still days when photographers lurked outside their building or when Damien's business obligations pulled him away for longer than the boys would have liked. But they were learning, all of them, how to build something new from the pieces of their separate lives. Mom? Noah called from the living room. Dad says he's going to teach us how to code next week. Can we get a computer? Victoria smiled at. The easy way, he said, Dad, as if Damien had always been part of their vocabulary, part of their world. We'll see, she said, the same answer she had been giving to ambitious requests for 7 years. But this time, she caught Damien's eye over the boys' heads and saw the quiet question there. This time, she had a partner to share the decisions, the expenses, the endless, beautiful responsibility of raising 2 remarkable children. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. It was something better, a real beginning, built on truth and patience, and the radical courage required to let love grow in the most unexpected places.